Welcome to the pod focusing on the aftermath and recovery from the devastating Palisades fires of January 2025. Journalist Joel Pollak, entrepreneur Oren Ezra, and technology expert Ron Goldschmidt serve up to the moment vital news and information, discuss the ongoing recovery efforts, and introduce us to the individuals and trades who are playing key roles in rebuilding our cherished communities. We're diving into the deep end and learning quickly how we can move forward together. We know the pain because we're living real-time news, stories, resources, and insights on the ongoing recovery effort. Buckle up. We're three homeless guys.
Welcome to Three Homeless Guys, the podcast about the Palisades fire and the rebuilding effort. I'm journalist Joel Pollak here with technology expert Ron Goldschmidt and entrepreneur Oren Ezra, and we are very pleased to be joined this week by Merritt David Farren. Merritt, we'll get into a much longer introduction later, but why don't you introduce yourself very quickly?
Sure. So I'm a Palisades resident, or I suppose former now, is a Palisades fire survivor. My background is that I was at Disney for 10 years, ending as the general counsel of Disneyland, where I headed legal, guest claims, and security, and I had 10 plus years at Amazon. I have, after the fire, we'll go into more detail, but I've jumped into the insurance commissioner race after having seen, after the fires, that insurance, as you guys have said on this program, has been one of the biggest things, if not the biggest things, that's been in the way of recovery.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for running. I think we need great people running for public office, and we've offered a platform to candidates to come and introduce themselves. And of course, the Office of Insurance Commissioner is extremely important, as we all know, in the Palisades fire burn area, the Eaton fire burn area. So thank you for doing that. I've got a bit of news, some political and then some personal. Obviously, the political news this week that everyone is talking about is the President's State of the Union address and the fallout from that, what it means. And I think that people took away different messages from that, but the message that's relevant to us is that the President talked about wanting to make the LA Olympics a success in 2028. And you can leave all the other stuff aside for a moment, and if you want my opinions on all the other stuff, you can find me on X or at the California Post. But saying that you are determined to make the LA Summer Olympic Games a success in 2028, I think is a vote of confidence in the rebuilding effort. We already know that the President has committed now to helping with the rebuild, with Lee Zeldin and others coming. So I think that's really key, because he could have picked any fight he wanted to with California. Certainly, the governor is fighting with him as often as possible, but Trump focused on the Olympics. And I do think that our rebuilding effort is somehow going to be tied into that, because they want to show the world how well we did and not how poorly we did. And so I think any connection we can make to that effort is going to be helpful. Some personal news. So one of the reasons my life is pretty hectic today, both work-wise and family-wise, is that I just arrived back in LA. I was in LA for the beginning part of the week. I went back to DC. I picked up my three older kids, and we just arrived back in LA. So the reason you see a strange bedroom behind me is that I'm staying with some friends in Santa Monica, and I literally just brought my kids back to LA for the first time since we left in June last year. And it's very emotional for all of us, and the kids are remembering everything, as did I when I came back from DC for the first time after a few months away. Not just things about Pacific Palisades, but things they did when they were small children, stores they went to with their grandmother who passed away on my wife's side. So very, very emotional, and I'm going to have to make sure that they're getting settled in, because they're 3 hours ahead in their minds. I don't know what time zone I'm in, but they for sure are on Eastern time. So I've got to make sure that they get fed and that they are situated. But I'll be popping in and out. And what we usually do, Merritt, is we go around and talk about news. So I'll leave that to the other two gentlemen. And if my camera pops in and out, that's why. But anyway, it's really great to be back. It's part of moving back in. We heard from other friends who are moving back into the neighborhood, and we're not moving into our house yet. Still quite an ordeal there with all the repair. I got a call from the bank at the airport asking me about insurance payouts and all kinds of craziness. And I almost lost patience with the guy, because I thought, everything's a negotiation. You're trying to rush me along, but I can't do anything to control the pace at which State Farm pays or doesn't pay something. So anyway, it's still a struggle, but this feels to me in some way like a small victory, taking the kids back home. So anyway, it's feeling good, even if it's a little bit crazy.
Great. No real news here, Merritt. I just want to jump right in because we were talking offline about how what the origin story for your run is, and I'd love for the viewers and listeners to hear that. Take us through like what brought you to the insurance commissioner race.
Sure. So again, thanks guys for having me on. I've been a loyal listener and viewer of the show. You guys have done so much to keep the attention on the Palisades. The guests you've had have been an inspiration to me and to others, people like Tracy Park, Joy Chen. Like you, people who have just jumped in and done something. I think that has been extremely meaningful for the entire community. It's been very meaningful and an origin story for me in this run. So my background is that I've lived in California since I was the age of 9, East Coast before that. I remain a huge fan of the state despite its challenges. I've no intention of leaving it, and I want to see it do as well as it possibly can. I went to public schools all my life. I had a very middle-class background. My father was a Navy pilot. The schools were terrific. The teachers were terrific. I was fortunate enough to go off to Stanford for my undergraduate studies, to Berkeley for law school, and then after that spent 10 years at Disney during some of its best years, ending there as general counsel of the Disneyland Resort, which remains one of my happiest places on earth. I was overseeing their legal, guest claims, and security. And then later in my career, after stints in corporate development at Sony Pictures and at a tech startup in San Diego, I was at Amazon for over 10 years, helping them launch all their digital products, and ended there as general counsel of Audible, which is owned by Amazon. So those are two of the world's, in my view, most customer-centric companies that know that doing well by customers is not in conflict with doing business well and having business success. They actually complement each other. So that's sort of my general perspective on things. And by the way, at those companies, this is absolutely true. I never for 1 minute had a time there where I felt I was being asked to do something or was surrounded by people who were thinking that we should do something that was not doing well by the customers. The customer always came first, right? So my house was burned down in the Palisades fire. I've got 2 sons, and the family lost our home. I'm convinced that fire, I think many believe this, and I think will be proven to be absolutely true, was the direct result of enormous mistakes made by people at the state, city, and county level. And they were made not just by accident, but they were made by people who were in their positions who were over their heads, right? Karen Bass did not have administrative experience before she took the incredibly important role of mayor of Los Angeles. And that's a CEO role. It's one of the biggest CEO jobs in the world. And supporters of hers, including some from business, some of whom I worked with at Disney, when I think to myself, would they have ever thought that someone with her degree of business experience should have been considered for a CEO role of their company? The answer would be no. And yet there she was. So obviously we all had the trauma of the fire. And then very quickly on the heels of that, it was very clear that families were being hit with a second trauma, which for many has actually been even almost harder to take than the fires, which is the insurance mess, right? It hit them by surprise. They've been struggling with it. And they're dealing with people. And if you're dealing with people who are making your life and your view miserable, that's almost more traumatic than a fire, right? So then on the heels of that, as you guys have covered here, of course, State Farm comes forward, and I had State Farm too. State Farm comes forward and asks for this massive rate increase, and the stories coming out are very quickly that Ricardo Laura, the current insurance commissioner, is going to give them a big part of that in an emergency basis. So people in the community, I'm on all these WhatsApp chats, you guys probably are too, are all saying, how can this be? And let's call the Department of Insurance and say they need to first do right by customers, and then we'll look at a rate increase. And I joined the calls too. And I got a very nice gentleman there who said, yeah, well, of course I understand your situation. He was very sympathetic, but the rate proceedings have nothing to do with the way in which companies treat customers. So I'm like, okay, that's what everybody's hearing. So I'm a lawyer. So I started looking at the regulations, and looking at that, I determined that there's a way for citizens to request to intervene in the rate setting process on behalf of consumers. So I filed a rather lengthy a petition to intervene based upon the fact that, number one, I said that that's a mistake, that you should, in setting a rate, you should understand what the product is you're setting the rate for. And I actually analogized. I said, if the state had a commissioner who was responsible for setting the price of automobiles and approving that, and the commissioner was approving the cost of automobiles without looking as to whether the automobile was a Kia or a Tesla, we'd say that was absurd. But that's what we're doing here. So and I also argued that my unique experience with a company that knows how to do business and also do well by consumers would give me a position to contribute. So the Department of Insurance objected, State Farm objected, the group Consumer Watchdog, who I think you guys know, who advocates on behalf of consumers, who was already in support of me. The judge, after hearing, let me in, noting that he felt that I was positioned to bring a unique perspective that could be beneficial to the proceedings. He did a great job, by the way, in his ruling, which is the sort of thing that, we all need to see. Right. So I jumped into that for a couple reasons. One, just like you guys, I saw that it was something that I could do just to jump in and make a difference directly without having to ask permission. And two, for my family and my neighbors, I knew that just demonstrating that when we're hit with a tragedy, we don't just act for ourselves. If we can act for the community, that's the real thing we need to do. And that's the real win that we teach our kids. So that's how I jumped in. I then started getting a lot more involved, and people came to me with questions about the insurance mess. I started looking at it from a bunch of angles, thinking about solutions. I was not intending to run for office, but some other comrades in arms in the Palisades and I started meeting with the candidates who were lining up to run. And with all due respect to the other candidates, after speaking to a number of them, we concluded, and I concluded too, that none of them have the business experience required, the technology and innovation experience required to get us out of this crisis, or the deep legal experience required. Right? Some of them are lawyers, but they haven't run. So that's how I then decided, literally, I think it was 3 weeks ago, my friend Allison looked across the table and said, okay, you need to run, Merritt. And so I made the decision to run, and I scrambled to get in, and I'm just getting going now with the campaign.
Just before jumping into the race, I'm super curious to hear, what was your experience dealing with State Farm personally, and putting on your lawyer hat? How was that from that perspective, like dealing with State Farm? We've gone a lot into like the problems that folks have had with them. Did you have similar problems? And from a legal perspective, how do you come out the other end feeling about State Farm and the whole process that we had to endure post-fire?
Yeah, so I've actually made a point of saying that I was treated comparatively well. I'm not sure that's entirely true, but I've said that specifically because I've not wanted my actions now, and certainly in the rate proceedings, to look like it was some sort of a personal mission or vendetta or what have you. But, that said, my experience paralleled lots of others. I think I came from a position of being able to remind them that I'm an attorney. I actually don't like litigation, but I did remind them that if that was necessary, we would go there. And I've done remodels of houses before, which most, haven't. And so that made the estimating of the costs and things like that easier for me. But mostly my focus has been on the general problems. And look, I come from companies where I actually had teams. We were looking to do well by the customer at Disney, at Amazon, and even there, coming out with rules, protocols that will ensure that happens is a challenge. And I say that because I look at our rules and regulations, they're extremely complicated. I think a lot that are meant to protect consumers, right? And yet they clearly haven't. Why haven't they? They're extremely complicated. And in that complication, the companies, and I won't necessarily target State Farm, but a company that wants to work around the rules, they actually benefit by those complications. And so I would say even today, there are new proposals being put forward in Sacramento to improve insurance. And they are, in my view, mostly things that are layering more rules on top of a code base of rules that is not working today. And that's not the approach that we need. So, and I'm happy to sort of jump into specific things, but I would say like what I would be doing, and I think this is an important kind of thematic setup, if you will. If I were elected tomorrow, there would be two things. There would be legislative changes that would seek to rewrite some important rules to let us have a tech innovation and simplification that will eliminate the opportunity for insurance companies to play with people, right? That's number one. And we would also, but beyond the legislation, there's a lot that this position can do if the commissioner wants to do it. If I were commissioner, right, you guys saw, you put your good finger on a number of things. I'll give you like two examples. Like one of the big problems, or two big problems here, right? One was that people didn't have enough insurance, right? That was one problem. And another problem was that companies like State Farm were not giving people realistic estimates of rebuild costs. So we're looking at the second one. Why, if I were insurance commissioner, I would say, fine, I'm going to get a panel of experts in Eaton, and for the Eaton fire area, in Palisades, and they're going to come up with estimates of costs to rebuild that give good per square foot ranges for different types of homes. We're not going to, the individual consumer shouldn't have to fight that one by one. The commission can jump forward and give those, and then that is going to be evidence if anybody has to go into a litigation with their insurance company, right? So my point is there will be sort of larger, legislation to fix the problem. It needs a big rewrite, not layering of more rules on top of rules. And then there will be administrative things that can be done right up front without asking for anybody's permission to take a page out of what you guys have done. Does that make sense? And similarly, on the big challenge that we've had with people not having enough insurance, there are actually laws today that put some responsibility on insurance companies to help with that. But they're so weakly written that the insurance companies have really managed to get around them. I mean, there were cases where the law was tested and the insurance company basically, at the end of their contract says, but ultimately, consumer, it's all on you. And the judge is like, well, it says it's all on the consumer. So basically that whole effort to get insurance companies to guide consumers properly about how much insurance they should have to have has not been effective. And so again, the insurance department under me would look at costs of rebuild and give people and publish that, right? Let's help the consumer know right up front, and let's require the insurance companies to tell them. The California Department of Insurance estimates that for your zip code, it will cost this much to rebuild your house. You only have $2 million of coverage. You better get 2.5, right?
So, Merritt, I have a question more to your lawyer hat, although it is related to insurance, and it's actually a couple of questions. The way I look at it, the main issue that we have with insurance are, one is basically insurance and the state or city issue, that because the state and the city didn't have water, they didn't take care of all the wood that need to be cut, all of this negligence. Because of this, the fire happened, and because of this, me and Ron were saying from, I think, the first episode that, you know what, fair enough, if the insurance companies need to charge me or like 3 times more, that's the risk. I can decide to go with them, or I can decide not to go with them. So maybe then we need to somehow open to more insurance companies that can come in or find solutions. But where does the state and city responsibility sit on this one? That's the first question. And the second question, and me and you talked about it yesterday briefly, like I had insurance. Let's assume that I paid for insurance of $10 million for my house, right? So I paid every month $30,000, whatever it is, because I wanted to insure my house for $10 million. The insurance didn't have problem taking my $30,000 every month, right? For to insure my house for $10 million. Now my house is a total loss. Pay me my premium. If you had any issues with it, why didn't you do it in advance? So it's too more of like your lawyer head, but interested to see what you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are a couple of, you're hitting on a couple of key points in my platform and what I would like to do if elected, and that I would jump straight into if elected. There's actually probably at least three things here, and I'll hit them in not a specific order necessarily, or into how you ask for them. So first and foremost, yeah, you're absolutely right. Insurance costs are a function of the safety of those who are being insured. And our city and county completely failed us. And, you got to be sympathetic ultimately to the insurance companies who didn't actually write their actuarial tables to assume that there would be no water in the fire hydrants. So yeah, those two things are tightly linked. The insurance department, as far as I know, has made no attempt to date to improve public safety. And then interestingly, in looking at all these issues, what I found is that insurance companies don't really look at that as their job either. They don't really look at risk mitigation as their job. They look at risk pricing as their job. So somebody needs to step forward. And if I'm in this role, it's going to be me. And so nobody needs to ask me for permission. I will get a panel and we'll come up with a set of community safety standards. And we'll publish those. And any city that is not up to those standards, if they don't want to improve themselves, I already spoke to an reinsurance expert out of New York 2 days ago, and I said, look, if I were in that situation, I wasn't getting cooperation, it wasn't moving the needle in these cities, but I'd put out these minimum standards, right, for fire safety. Would you be able to look at different communities and say, hey, Santa Barbara has met this standard, and Los Angeles hasn't for Pacific Palisades, or Malibu hasn't, and could you give me a difference in pricing? And he said, sure. So there's a way of, this role needs to play an active role there. Does that make sense? And by the way, it needs to play an active role rolling beyond that in every line of insurance, auto, business, where workers' comp is a big problem, in health. And it needs to look for the underlying costs, drivers that are causing the insurance rates to go up.
Yes,
so now I'll go back to your...
comp. Please solve the workers' comp issue. You know how much money I'm paying on workers' comp? And I didn't even think about it. But not only this, like, I'll tell you something crazy, and I'm sorry that I'm cutting you off. It's just like
No, please.
Really bother me. Okay, yeah. I have employees, right? I have a lot of employees, like, 40, 50 employees. Every employee that come and start working over here, we have to ask for his, like, social security number. We take them through, like, the process, making sure they're legal. End of the day, I have other friends that, like, didn't build the system, and they have, like, smaller factories. So they have like 5-10 people. I have a really good friend. They have a 3PL place next to me, and they hired people. The person that they hired gave them like a social security card. They ran it. Everything looks good. Great. That person works for them for like 4 or 5 years. End up suing them for something that is like bullshit. Not suing them. Suing their how do you call it? Suing their insurance, right? Got a lot of money, and guess what? That person is not even a legal resident of the U.S. because everything all the papers that he had were fake. So, and again, it's connected to insurance, and this is why it's so hard to live in California. We're talking about houses right now. I'm talking from the point of like a pain of somebody that is crazy enough to manufacture not only in California but in LA City. You know how much taxes they're taxing me for like machines that I have for like I have some machines that are 40, 50 years old, right? And I'm paying tax for it every year.
Yeah. No, and look, I mean, that's not okay. And by the way, so one of my competitors is from the Bernie camp. whose perspective, if you think it's bad now for you, Oren, it will get worse, and that's not okay. And it's perverse, because if Joel will say hello to Joel's kin there.
This is Amira.
Yeah, look, actually, if I'm on the stage with Jane Kim again, this Democratic Socialist running for insurance commissioner, we kept it very friendly on the forum that I was on before. But she makes a big deal out of, I eliminated, the fees in San Francisco for community college. And so I'm going to say to her, okay, that's fine, but what jobs were you also eliminating by driving businesses out of San Francisco? And what would actually be more beneficial to your college graduates? Would they rather graduate with a fairly small debt from community college and have a job? Or do they want to graduate from, not having college debt to a job market that has disappeared because you're driving people out of the state? I'm completely sympathetic to your situation, Oren. And on workers' comp specifically, so one of the challenges is that what will happen with insurance is that the insurance company may prefer to simply settle. And so they don't, even if it's a completely bogus claim, I don't know about your friend's situation there, but it's a common problem that people bring bogus workers' comp claims. The insurance companies don't want to get involved. Their lawyers are expensive. They pay it off, but then they ding the business for having had a claim that was paid off, and they raise the insurance cost for the business. That's not okay. And by the way, workers' comp is under this division. So we got to get under that and figure out how that gets changed, right? Healthcare, it's harder because we've got federal programs galore and all kinds of challenges. But look, we're one of the biggest economies in the world. We're one of the biggest insurance markets in the world. If I'm, commissioner of insurance in California, I'm going to take a point of view about some of these underlying costs that are driving up healthcare for everybody and are causing huge problems. And I will use my position to go after them and try and move change. So, and then going back to your point, yeah, the reality is, of course, we have to bring insurance companies back into the state while keeping them honest and making sure we simplify the rules so that they have to pay out. And Oren, you and I spoke about this a little bit yesterday. So yeah, your point, if I get, $500,000 in personal property insurance for my home, why don't they just have to pay that out the minute your house burns down? Of course they should. And what I said to you is, the law should be changed. And if they have an issue with that, because insurance companies might say, oh, well, then people are going to gamble with insurance. Well, here's the solve. We have a simple thing with an iPhone program that will allow people to walk through their home. AI will tally up the costs. You'll send it into the insurance company who's going to write your policy. If they don't think that's sufficient, then they should let you know right up front. But yeah, absolutely. And it just makes no sense whatsoever to be fighting with people after the fact when they're in a state of distress about something you could have easily established with them up front. Right. And then let me just, if I can, roll into, so here's the biggest problem. And I think you and I touched on it yesterday briefly, Oren. So the biggest problem keeping insurance companies out of the state, great actors and actors who are perhaps not as good, is fair plan. So fair plan structure, you guys may know this, but your viewers and listeners may not. Fair plan was set up as expected to be a very small program for some people who just couldn't get insurance on the normal markets when the markets were working better than they are, much better than they are today. And it was set up because the state said, well, we're going to set up this separate kind of insurance. Acts as an insurance company. The state says, well, we don't know anything about running insurance, so we're going to get the insurance industry itself to run Fair Plan. So the big insurance companies all have representatives on the board of Fair Plan. They're the ones making Fair Plan's decisions. But the state set it up so that there's no transparency into what they're doing. So first of all, we've got a group of people who are running this thing that don't even have their names on the customer service. And that's obviously not good. It's not worked well for consumers at all who are in Fair Plan. They're being treated, I think, even worse than people in State Farm who are concerned and others, right? So it's not working on the consumer side. And then here's the real problem. On the insurance company side, the insurance companies are on the hook for capital shortfalls of Fair Plan if it has a huge problem, cost problem after fires. So what happens, you guys are business people, like if I'm sitting here as an insurance company, let's just say, assume I'm a good actor, am I going to be happy about a potentially huge capital call that I don't even control? No, and the capital call is based upon the proportionate number of policies they've written statewide. So if I'm getting spooked about that, and any good business person would get spooked, you're going to start canceling people because you want less of that potential capital call. And by the way, the minute you cancel them out, your capital call percentage is going to go down. So that has been an enormous driver. And then what happens to those people who have been canceled by State Farm and others because State Farm doesn't want to get hit with that? They go in Fair Plan, and Fair Plan gets bigger and more spooky. So we have to eliminate the need for Fair Plan to get insurance companies back into California. And the fact that the state hasn't recognized that is absurd. So I put out a very specific plan, modeled on a plan that Florida came up with to deal with a similar crises with insurance following hurricanes. That's their big risk. And modeled on a program that the United Kingdom came up with to deal with their big problem today, which is a lot of flooding. They've got villages that are low-lying, they've been fine for thousands of years, all of a sudden they're not. And the UK is a huge center for insurance, Lloyd's of London. A lot of the money on the back end of insurance comes out of the UK. So they've got a lot of expertise. So they created programs similar to what I proposed, where you create a reinsurance fund behind the insurance policies that are written for consumers. And the insurance company writing your policy, Ron, it's State Farm, Farmers, whoever, they write the policy, they cover everything. And then that one risk, that one thing that's messing the whole thing up, which is, wildfire, I call it community fire, because ours was not a wildfire in the Palisades, burn our whole town down. So that one piece gets handed off to the reinsurance authority, right? So that means that any insurance company can write a policy, a big insurance company, small insurance company, high fire risk, low fire risk, they can write that policy without worrying about that one thing that's mucking everything up. And then on the back end, if there's a problem, the reinsurance authority comes in and it will pay out, and it will pay out using exactly what you've suggested, Oren. If I have
so where is the responsibility of the city, of the state? Now, because the city and the state are not taking the funds and not using them correctly and not making sure that we have enough water in our water reservoirs, and they're not cutting down the wood and not taking really good care of it, that makes my insurance way higher, because it makes sense. There is more risk. But I'm paying taxes. We're paying a lot of taxes. We're probably paying the most taxes all over the state. So where is there the responsibility? We can always solve it, but hey, you know what? Fair enough. Yeah, we need to pay more taxes. Where's the responsibility of the state and the city? Where is all this money? And you know what? We started talking about it when everything started to explode with Nick Shirley and everybody that bringing out more things. So I don't know if you have an answer for it, but that's what I'm very interested about in the last few months.
Yeah, of course.
I don't mind paying great taxes. We have amazing weather. California is beautiful. I don't want to leave it. I've been paying these taxes since 2002. Love it. Not a problem. But give me the services that I need. Who is responsible? Who is taking this money and not freaking building a roof behind the water reservoir that just burned 10,000 houses?
Yeah, look, I used to be like you, and I used to be fine paying tax in the state. I've become a little less fine just recently, partly as a result of what happened to all of us and exactly what you're talking about. So I intend to be, as a slight tangent, I spoke to one political advisor. He said, oh, you just need to, you just hit on the insurance companies. That's all you do. That's how you get elected. I'm not going to do that. In this entire process, right, what I'm fed up with is people not being straight and honest about the challenges. So I'm going to give you a two-headed answer here, because you really got to have one. So here's what I would want to get done if elected. I would want us to both have the standards that I talked about, the minimal standards, and I would want a change in the law in California that would strip sovereign immunity away from cities and counties that didn't meet those standards. Because as you know today, they give themselves immunity. Now, there are lawsuits that are trying to work their way around it, and quite frankly, I hope they'll be successful, but it's a challenge. So that's what I would want to do. But the reality is the legislature in Sacramento is probably not going to support that because no one there will want to vote against their buddy Karen Bass's, city. You see the problem, right? But that's what I will propose. That's number one. And then number two, as I said, what I would be able to do would be point out the difference in insurance costs you and I would pay in LA if LA hasn't fixed those problems versus what we would pay in Ventura if Ventura is doing a good job. Does that make sense? I mean, we have to put a spotlight on it. We have to make it real, but we also have to be realistic about the means of actually making something happen. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, 100%. So let's say that you get elected. What are the first 30 days, the 3 things that you want to achieve in the first 30 days?
So within the first 30 days, first of all, I would push this cow reinsure problem because if we don't get rid of the fair plan problem, we won't get insurance companies back in. That's number one. Number two, I would immediately get together elite committees that would include people from business, from in the insurance industry, and for the consumer rights advocates to look at the underlying problems in each of our lines of insurance and start coming up with specific solutions for those. Number three, I would jump straight into doing the things I mentioned earlier that could help people today in Eaton and the Palisades. They shouldn't have to fight the sort of details of their program. They shouldn't have to fight themselves about what the rebuild cost is. There's no reason the department can't jump right in there. And then four, as you know, Ricardo Lara started a market conduct survey of State Farm in June. They've not even come out with that yet. I mean, at Amazon, we would have looked at that, I'm sure, within about 3 weeks and said, here's 10 things that you're doing that really need to change. Let's get them changed, right? And then beyond that, and I would say, again, the big look with the committees would be how do we bring technology into all of this? So we need to simplify the rules and we need to let technology help on the front end and on the back end because insurance is largely about, the insurance companies write the policies and then they roll the risk on to other people. It's kind of like what we have with mortgages. Wells Fargo might write my mortgage, but they intend to resell it to someone else. So right now, there's nobody wanting to buy those, partly for the reasons you've articulated. Like they're thinking I don't even know how to quantify this risk if you're not going to have firemen and women there. So that all gets tied together. But technology, I'm convinced, on the back end will also help. So if we get better technology to align each of our homes with their particular risk profile, and we let that roll through to a better marketplace on the back end for reinsurance, that's going to allow for efficiencies in the market to come in and prices to come down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And by the way, I love the fact that more and more people will come from the business side, not from the politician side. People that did something, know how it's running, how quickly it's moving in the big companies. I'm hoping that more people will do the move like you're doing, Merritt.
Yeah, I think I think people without that perspective just don't really understand the mindsets. So let's look at one. I think there's a new proposal now to add penalties for insurance companies that mean that they'd have to pay interest, if they haven't paid out on time. Okay, that's a fine idea. But to the underlying law right now leaves us with a very messy situation as to when any of us should actually be paid. Right? Because, I'm still getting an estimate and we're still looking at this and still looking at that. So when would that, extra interest thing kick in? Now, if I'm a good actor in the insurance business, I'm going to think, okay, now we just even have more complication. I don't even know how to advise my team or my finance team to start thinking that we're going to pay interest. And the bad actor is going to go, hey, great, because it's all such a mess. We're just going to, we're just not going to pay interest, and we're going to make it difficult for people in the way they always do with complication. Does that make sense? I mean, I think you have to have that understanding of how business really works to cut through it and make it simple and eliminate the opportunities for the bad actors to act badly.
Merritt, tell us where we can find out more about your campaign and follow what you're doing.
Yeah, so I do finally have a website up. I went my first talk I went to, people were like, do you have a website? I'm like, yeah, that would be a good idea. So it is up. It's my first name, Merritt, last name, Farren, CA for California.com, www.merrittfarrenca.com.
MERRITTFARRENCA.
Yep, that's it. And look, in terms of go forward basis, you guys are doing an awesome job. I realize, like you, that many people aren't tuned in here, right? And to be successful, to win in this, to win this race, I need people to know what the issues are, to realize it's important, and then to focus on who can bring the right solutions. If I don't have that, they're going to do what they often do and not look at the right things. So you guys are doing an awesome job. Keep doing that is what I would say.
Thanks for joining us. And of course, we welcome other candidates on as well. Ron, there's a major echo on your side. I don't know. It sounds like you're under a truck, which you might be. But anyway, we're making the best of this situation. All of us still in motion, and very glad to be here. You saw my daughter there earlier. Glad to be back, and the kids getting back in touch with their home. We're Three Homeless Guys, threehomelessguys.com. You can reach us at pod at
4 today.
What's that?
Today we're 4 homeless guys.
The 4 homeless guys, exactly. Well, we're very glad Merritt's standing up for his community, and until next week, stay strong.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Merritt.
Thanks for listening to Three Homeless Guys. If this episode hit home, please subscribe to our channel. Check out threehomelessguys.com for RSS feeds to your favorite streaming service. Follow us on social and share this with a friend who needs to hear it. Drop us a review or shoot us a message at pod@threehomelessguys.com. We'd love to hear from you. Stay strong, and we'll catch you next time.